More turmoil in the Middle East. That as drones attack major Saudi oil facilities, causing a huge spike in crude prices. Now, even though it all happened several thousand miles away, we could feel the ripple here stateside. The fire burning, smoke from the facility seen from space, that after a strike on a Saudi oil facility. It put more than a half of Saudi Arabia's oil production offline. These satellite images, released by American officials, show the damage at the oil processing plant as well as oil field, considered the heart of the kingdom's supply. Prices, they spiked more than 20% this morning. In response, the president tweeting, "Plenty of oil and a threat. We are locked and loaded depending on verification." That verification would come from Saudi Arabia. Their Minister of Energy, seen here touring the facilities, their military, they've confirmed Iranian weapons were used, but have yet to accuse anyone of actually executing the attack. Yemen's Houthi rebel group, which is backed by Iran, they've taken credit, but the U.S. says there's no evidence that they were to blame, instead claiming
the United States wholeheartedly condemns Iran's attack on the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. And we call on other nations to do the same.
A senior administration official says that they have intelligence that shows a highly coordinated attack launched from Iranian soil. Tehran, however, denies any involvement. Their foreign minister mocking the U.S., having failed at max pressure, now turning to max deceit. The escalation follows the attack on oil tankers in the Persian Gulf this summer. At the time, the U.S. turned the other cheek.
Just a few days ago, the administration was talking about lifting sanctions and having discussions at the UN with the Iranians. But now we're as close to an armed conflict in the Persian Gulf as we have been in decades.
And for more, let's bring in Rick Unger. He's the host of the nationally syndicated radio show, The Rick Unger Show. Rick, you know, I think for a lot of our viewers, they'll look at what happened to the oil refiners in the fields and they'll say, oh, well, that's bad, but that's a Middle Eastern problem. Explain both, you know, the pain at the pump, but also geopolitically, how concerning a major flare-up with Iran would be, obviously with the Saudis involved, just how big of a mess this could be economically and also, as I said, as it relates to the Middle East.
Well, there's a lot in that question. I mean, in terms of what it means to the Middle East, we'll start with that. Economically, I think people are going to be surprised. You got a very quick pop in the price of oil, understandably. But the reality is the Saudis say they've already gotten a third to a half of the capacity that was shut down from this bombing. It's already back online. So in terms of disruption of oil to the world, I don't think that's going to be nearly as intense as some originally thought. Now, depending on what we do with Iran, that could have a huge impact. If the president decides that a war footing is necessary, a war with Iran would not only be highly problematic to the United States and, of course, Iran, but it would create a serious economic problem because you would see the Iranian oil industry, no doubt, go down. That would have a huge continuing impact on world energy supplies. It would be a very, very messy situation, not something easily achieved by the U.S.
One thing that struck me was as soon as the president tweeted what we did that we just shared with the audience, the immediate visceral distrust of what was the agenda, what were actually the facts, etc. Not that any president should be given carte blanche if they say, you know, these are the bad guys here, lock and loaded, we're ready to go. But particularly with this president, I mean, on the heels of, well, 12,000 things that he's misstated, but really even on the heels of what he did with Noah, there is so much lack of confidence in when he says or tweets something that it's on the level. I mean, it came into such stark detail right after this latest development.
Yeah, well, there's obviously good reason for it. When you have a president who, for the past number of days, weeks, has been saying that he's interested in sitting down with Iran without any preconditions to that meeting. And then all of a sudden he says, I never said that. That's the media doing fake news. Well, you've got a problem there. The American public, interestingly, has come to expect that of this president. We know that he has trouble keeping those things straight. I am more concerned with what it means to leaders around the world, because that leaves them scratching their heads saying, I have absolutely no idea what American policy is going to be here. That is a problem. Look, the whole locked and loaded thing, we've heard this a number of times before. It's precisely what he said when he was going after the leader of North Korea in his tweets. Well, they turned out to apparently be dating their best friends. You can't really put much into it. Are we heading towards a problem with Iran? There's absolutely nothing that we know from this president that would tell us because of his inconsistency. That is a problem. That's a problem on the world stage.
Also problematic to me, Rick, was the language and the couching of, we'll wait to see what the Saudis say, as if we're going to be taking our directives, in effect, from Riyadh. I mean, obviously we have allies, but the language was, well, we'll wait for them to tell us basically what the next step will be. I haven't seen that before.
Yeah, that was kind of an odd tweet. It also, I mean, when you logic it out, it doesn't make a lot of sense. Look, the Saudis have already shared with us and with the world that they too believe that this was the Iranians doing. And look, I mean, based on the satellite imagery that is now available, they're probably right. If you look at the direction the attack came from, it really could not have come from Yemen. Maybe one or two launches could have come from that western side. But the reality is these attacks came from the north and the northwest, and that would be Iran. Look, I try not to get too sucked into any particular tweet that this president puts out because we know he does it off the top of his head. I'm going to presume that he meant that he wanted to consult with the Saudis, and that would be appropriate. It was, of course, Saudi facilities that were attacked. But it's hard to imagine that he'll be taking his directions from Saudi Arabia. At least I would certainly hope not.
Rick, let's say there's compelling evidence that, in fact, it was the Iranians. What do we do? You can't let this go without a response, but yet, especially with all the dislocation that's happened with his national security advisors, DOD, I worry about a coherent, proportionate response here that has a plan to it. I mean, even with the best of intentions, we see how things can get screwed up, but it's particularly with a gang that can't shoot straight, you worry about what's the next shoe to drop.
Well, that is the billion-dollar question, isn't it? Because I suspect we are going to be able to confirm that Iran was either literally launched this attack or will know that it was their weapons that were used. And that does raise the question, what do you do? Now, the last time that the president was faced with a situation when they shot down one of our aircraft, he decided to back off. He was going to launch an attack and decided it wasn't worth the 150 lives he was told that it would cost. Obviously, a lot of people have questioned if that's what his real reason was or if they just never really got it together. I don't know. I mean, this president has no philosophy. And when you have no philosophy, it's impossible to gauge what a response might be. We also don't know if this president will listen to anybody. I'm not going to pretend that I'm sorry that John Bolton's not there any longer, because the last person I would want whispering into the president's ear at a time like this would be the hawk of all hawks, John Bolton. I want to see if there needs to be a response, and I can certainly understand if there does. It needs to be measured. It needs to be proportional. It needs to make sense. It can't be a crazy reaction.
Rick, as always, I appreciate it. And again, folks, check out Rick's radio program. Always appreciate the time. Thank you.
Good. Take care.
All right, everybody, when we come back, New York, it is the latest state to ban certain types of e-cigarettes. That as more and more people get sick from vaping. After the break, a top doctor, she'll join us to explain what is going on and whether or not the FDA can do anything about the growing crisis.